Hello YouTube, Dave here again. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be recording my first video in our new home. I'm doing this during the daytime. There's natural light coming through. This is great. I cannot, again, words cannot express how much I am going to enjoy this. So I was thinking that for my first new video in our new home, it might be kind of fun to do a video on something that I picked up after we bought the house. So on Easter Sunday, we went out hoping to pick up a few things, completely forgetting that it was the Easter weekend. And the only thing that actually ended up being open was a local drugstore. So we went in and we were just kind of looking around, and something caught my attention at the magazine rack, and that was this here. So this is Unofficial, the ultimate guide to Dungeons and Dragons. Now this was $16.99, so $17 Canadian. A bit of a hefty price, but generally speaking, with these really expensive magazines, it tends to be pretty light on ads. So I'm hoping that's going to be the case here. Either very few ads or even ad-free would be great. I actually haven't even flipped through this at all since I picked this up, because I want my actual opinions and first impressions to be part of the video. I don't know how widely available this is going to be or how easy it might be to come across if you yourself are looking for it. Like I said, I was at my local, I shouldn't say local, but my nearby Lawton's drugstore in Nova Scotia to find this, but this might be something that you might be able to find at your local drugstores or grocery stores or even your local bookstores. Most of them have magazine sections still, at least I think they do. So yeah, we're going to flip through this, and I'm not going to focus too much on any specific articles in this video. However, if there is something that does catch your attention and you want me to go into further detail on, then I will be sure to do this. So let's just take a look. We got the cover art here. And, you know, you're probably not going to see a lot of official Dungeons & Dragons artwork, either past or present. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that is fantasy-inspired, but definitely not, like, identifiably Dungeons & Dragons. But we do got a cool-looking dragon on the cover there. I do like that. We have what looks like a Death Knight there. And then some other characters that might honestly be taken from, like, the new Baldur's Gate video game. It's really hard to say, but there's some decent little character portraits there, and a really cool looking dragon, so I'm pretty happy with that. And then on the back of the book, we just have, again, some other fantasy artwork there, and some really, really cool stuff. On the back, it reads, Dungeons & Dragons has continued to expand over the past 50 years while also setting the template for generations of new games, movies, and literature. In a game that plays out in the imagination, the possibilities are endless. So I can't really fault anything there. That's pretty cool. So let's just go ahead and get right into this, shall we? So again, we got a pretty cool, again, I'm going to say that's a Death Knight. That looks very much like Death Knight armor, and sort of an opposing figure to me, but I love that. The ultimate guide to Dungeons and Dragons. Then we have our content. So the first chapter introduction is why we love D&D. Okay. Chapter 1 is the phenomenon. So that must be, okay, it's broken up into 3 parts, it looks like. So the phenomenon includes part 1, the satanic panic. That should be interesting. Part 2, loud and proud. Millions of people play Dungeons & Dragons, including celebrities. Again, that's true. Part 3, on the big screen, what we know about the new movie Honor Among Thieves. So I have seen that movie, and maybe I'll talk about it a little bit here in this video. Chapter 2 is the game, and part 1 is the list, our favorite campaign settings from throughout D&D's history. Part 2 is highly recommended character class combinations every player should try at least once. That might be interesting. The most powerful spells and abilities and how to use them, and become a grand master. Tips to being a great DM. Okay, well, let's check that out. And then we've got part 3 for fun and profit. This might be my least favorite part of the magazine, to be honest. But we got part 1, Critical Role, how a good DM and table of voice actors create a sensation. Going Pro, the rise of professional dungeon masters, and names to remember if there's ever a D&D Hall of Fame, and then a look to the next version of Dungeons & Dragons. All right. Again, I'm not going to read everything verbatim here, but I think that's just what the one page, right? Okay. I will read this because it's just a couple of paragraphs. So it says, why we love D&D, from cottage industry to pop culture phenomenon, the rise of Dungeons and Dragons has been an adventure. By Jordan Zakarin. I hope I said that right. I also love the Nat 20 showing there, which is something I don't get to see that often when I'm rolling. The corridors are dark, the party is exhausted, and HP is perilously low. Still, you press on. Hours of relentless grinding, spellcasting, and negotiation with evil mages brought you deep into this dungeon. Edging nearer and nearer to the wizard's tomb, the quest has unfurled in a maze of carefully designed chaos, but it never fails to catch you off guard when an orc suddenly begins an attack. You have to roll for initiative and think fast. After all, tens of thousands of people could be watching the battle on a live stream broadcast to paying fans around the world. So I don't know. Are there live streams that are hidden behind paywalls? I mean, there might be on like private websites, but like on Twitch and YouTube, I don't think they have the ability to lock that stuff, do they? So I'm not quite sure about. I mean, there is. I shouldn't say that, because there is things like the conventions, like the Acquisitions Incorporated and stuff like that, where they do broadcast the event into like theaters. So it is possible. Yeah, I guess it's possible. It's kind of new to me, I guess. This type of world that we live in now. But I mean, you could definitely have thousands of people watching. I just don't know about paying fans to watch it. But I guess, like I said, if it's for something like that, it makes sense. Created in 1973 by tabletop game enthusiasts Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, Dungeons & Dragons began as a self-published role-playing game, RPG in brackets, that has since brought high fantasy to kitchen tables and turned suburban dens into forbidden forests and otherworldly planes. D&D's current prevalence in our pop culture zeitgeist is hardly predetermined, and in fact feels more like the product of a dozen natural 20 rolls the dice. The game's inspirations were originally drawn from a subculture of tabletop games and centuries of European myths and folktales. Not to mention early to mid-century fantasy novels such as Lord of the Rings, elves, wizard, mages, and orcs. I don't know why wizards and mages are separated there. They're usually one and the same. Um, and orcs are hardly at the center of social imagination, and beyond its niche subject matter, the game required a 112-page rulebook, endless hours of diligent note-taking, and frequent use of a calculator. Fair enough. Hardly an invitation to mass popularity, and yet a hardcore fan base spread the gospel, first at hobby stores and then conventions, with the game's always gorgeous artwork and entrancing lore, slowly drawing in curious minds seeking adventure and escape. Players can take on any form and yield any weapon while seeking out glory in worlds intricately designed by the world's most accomplished fantasy creators or by their dungeon master friends. It is a unique sort of freedom that even the most cutting-edge video game cannot deliver. I will not argue that ever. I love video games. I was a video game player and well established in my love for video games well before I got into D&D. There's just no comparison. Though its publishers have been beset by various financial and personal woes, Dungeons & Dragons has continued to expand over the past 50 years, while also setting the template for generations of new games, movies, and literature in a game that plays out in the imagination, the possibilities. Oh, that's literally what it says in the back. So that was a quote for the introduction. Overall, the introduction's not bad. Except I'm not going to read every single article or anything like that. But this is pretty short. A few things that seemed kind of strange to me, but again, it's just maybe from my perspective. The paying viewers of live streams, things kind of caught me by surprise a little bit. And just like differentiating wizards and mages, though, I'm used to using those two terms interchangeably, but that's not going to be the case for everybody. So, a pretty cool little introduction, and yeah, I can't really fault most of what was said in that. So, really cool stuff. So we got part 1, the Phenomenon. That's a really cool looking red dragon there. I love that. That is some sweet artwork. So we're going to just go right into Satanic Panic, are we? Made for, the Mazes and Monsters. Oh my goodness. I've never watched Mazes and Monsters. I've seen clips of it. And, I mean, I love Tom Hanks. I think Tom Hanks is great, but I sort of question that particular movie. But, okay, yeah. So, okay, jumping right to 2021. Okay. Again, I might read this in a little bit more detail later on if we need to, or if you're interested in any of these. We're just going to kind of go through it here. But the Satanic Panic, we do have James Egbert here, who was one of the individual. Sorry. So James Egbert II, opposite page, okay, was joined by private investigator William Deere at a September. Oh, okay, yeah. So this is the son that ended up taking his own life, and at the time, Dungeons and Dragons was heavily to blame for it, even though there was clearly a litany of other issues. One of the things I'm actually really happy about, being a tabletop gamer in this day and age, is the fact that while there's still people that will 100% believe in the satanic panic sort of thing, or the fact that Dungeons and Dragons somehow ruins lives, it's the fact that for the most part people realize that this is a social activity that is very beneficial to one's mental health and development. And like a couple of years ago, I did a volunteer work with Autism Nova Scotia to use Dungeons and Dragons to help some of their teens that were part of the program to develop social skills, to develop team working, to kind of help them just learn to like work as a group and to cooperate with one another. And it was great. Like it's just so the fact that D&D went from being like the cause of people taking their own lives when their character in the game dies, to the point where it's like, no, there was a lot of other, issues. And what's more likely than not was that, the Dungeons and Dragons was something that they were using to help cope with all these issues. And it was usually found that people that had tragically taken their own lives after being known to play Dungeons and Dragons, in a lot of the cases, it was sort of the same thing where they hadn't been playing for quite some time. And I know for myself personally, that was a really big safety net, which for better or for worse, got me through some really rough times. So it's always a tragedy, but at some point we got to look beyond the easy finger pointing and try to come to what the actual root cause of the problem was. And with with the Eckbert situation, there was a lot of stuff going on, unfortunately. Mass media painted a particular picture of a D&D, so obscure game and the teenager's erratic behavior. In reality, prolonged depression and drug abuse. Okay, so this is more about the Eckbert stuff, which was true. He was prone to depression. He was using drugs. He was also had what was considered to be an alternative lifestyle, I guess, back at that point in time, which was in the 70s, was not particularly socially accepted. There's just a lot of things that was going on, which is really unfortunate here. Maybe I can read most of this stuff in in future videos. But like I said, we're just kind of flipping through here, seeing kind of what we got. And yeah, so we went from, I think this was mostly just about the, okay, so we had the Eckbert situation, we had the Mazes and Monsters, which was, yeah, based off of that. My goodness. So what happened after that? How did D&D, a game shunned and condemned by a seeming majority of Americans in the mid-'80s, morph into a niche hobby to having a significant presence in the mainstream zeitgeist? They like to use the term zeitgeist. I see that. In some ways, the answer is simple. Nerdy stuff became cool, which I guess it did. I mean, you had Star Wars, you had Lord of the Rings, the Harry Potter stuff. I mean, that is all true. So it says nerd culture, the launch of J.K. Rowling's first Harry Potter novel, the return of Star Wars, and Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings film trilogy all brought wizards, magic, and mythical creatures to the fore. And I'm not going to deny that. I think that there was a lot of, a lot of people seeing these kind of fantasy elements and then maybe learning about something, hey, there's a game that you might play that, it captures some of that stuff. Yeah, and then, it even talks about, okay, so it talks about the COVID-19 and how that kind of moved people to sort of like online gaming and streaming and how things kind of became popular with that there as well. So, yeah, I mean, kind of cool. Not as much information as I was hoping. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not saying that this is bad information or anything, but there's a lot of the space so far has been taking up with just massive pictures and not a ton of writing. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit more here. But yeah, let's just sort of move on. This is the Loud and Proud. So these are just talking about the celebrities that play Dungeons and Dragons, which, for me, when I was first getting into it, like I was part of that generation where we weren't quite comfortable talking about it in a public setting. It was one of those things where, you knew you were going to be probably ridiculed or judged if you discussed it too openly. And I actually remember when I moved to the South Shore to be with my wife, the call center that I was working at, one of the guys that was there, turns out he was a pretty avid gamer, and it was like a shame that I was already there for like a year and a half, and I was only going to be there for a few more months before we kind of discovered that we both loved this sort of stuff, because he became a really good friend and somebody that since the COVID-19 pandemic hit, I just haven't had a chance to hang out with again in person, which really sucks. I would love to hang out with him again and play some games. But yeah, it's really cool. Like I find it really great to see that even if I don't watch celebrity games, even if I'm not really interested in watching a lot of like Twitch streams and stuff like that, I think it's really cool that that is an outlet now. And we have, Will Wheaton we had, but we've got Deborah. Was it Deborah Warhol? I think it probably gives the names there. Deborah Ann Wool. Okay, sorry, Deborah Ann Wool. I'm not good with names, but yeah, seeing these people, Kevin Smith, again, just really kind of cool to see that Dungeons and Dragons has become a bit more culturally appropriate. I don't know why. I think he. Oh, that's. Oh my goodness, Dan Harmon. I was gonna say he's dressed like Bird Person, but that's because he created it there. Stephen Colbert, very famous D&D nerd. I love that as well, along with Vin Diesel and some other individuals. My Chemical Romance, I'm not as interested in that myself personally, but it's still pretty cool to see. It's similar to what a high-stakes poker game might be. Okay, this I got to take a little bit of a look at here, because I don't know what a high-stakes poker game has to do with D&D, but we'll see. Such a big fantasy and D&D fan that he wanted his nickname to be Merlin when he first started playing. Stephen Colbert, in addition to famously being Lord of the Rings superfan, is also a D&D fan dating back to the game's early days. In 1979, he attended a tabletop convention, Gen Con, and walked away with a copy of the first Dungeon Master's Guide, signed by the game's co-creator, Gary Gygax. I do like the fact that, they're not putting 100% of the creation credit on Gary, because he did have other people that were helping him with that. So it's really cool to see that actually, kind of alluded to properly. And I love Gary, like, don't get me wrong, but there were definitely other people that were integral to the creation and success of D&D in the early days. So it's nice to see that he's not just being credited here as like the game's sole creator, which I've seen other individuals or publications do in the past. So again, really cool stuff. Let's see, he's played a couple of games for charity as well. It's not hard to see how Dungeons & Dragons, a game where players invent whole fantasy worlds and make up an epic story together while thinking on their feet the whole time, might have influenced some people making blockbuster today. Jon Favreau, who directed Iron Man and The Mandalorian, credited the game with helping him become the filmmaker he is today. That's actually really cool. I never really followed a lot of his stuff, so it said, did help me, Favreau said. You're putting it on a show. While there were many celebrities who play D&D and more who are getting into the game as it gets more and more popular, it's important to remember that in this case, stars really are just like us. It doesn't matter how famous you are. If you roll a 1 while fighting a dragon, you're toast. Okay, fair enough. And then on the big screen, what we know about the new movie Honor Among Thieves. So again, I'm not going to go too much into this here, but I think it's just going to probably showcase a little bit about the actors and some of the story stuff. It is mentioning the previous D&D movie. So let's just take a look at what the little caption says here for Fantasy Flop, which was the first Dungeons and Dragons movie, a movie that I'm gonna have to talk about at some point in the near future. I kind of wanted to give my thoughts on the original and actually just go through like the different D&D movies and just kind of share my thoughts on them. Although it would be like an audio form, I wouldn't be including like screenshots or scenes or anything like that, because from watching a lot of movie reviewers on YouTube, I know that that is just absolutely asking for your channel to start getting in trouble. So I really don't want to get into that, but I will talk about them. I think it'd be kind of fun to share or to have open a discussion on them, I guess. But we got Fantasy Flop, the first D&D movie with a cast that included Thor Birch and Jeremy Irons and Marlon Wayans, bombed in 2000. Okay, that's... Can't argue that. Direct to DVD, so the sequel, the Wrath of the Dragon God, was direct... Oh, okay, it doesn't really give you much there. So I'm not going to get too far into it here in this particular video, but the first D&D movie was really rough. I do have a bit of a soft spot for it, just because the year it came out on VHS. My aunt picked it up for me as a Christmas gift. It was one of the first and few D&D related things that I ever got for Christmas, and it was the absolute first item I ever got that was specifically Dungeons and Dragons. And this was when, you know, my family was not too keen on me playing because they remembered the Satanic Panic stuff. And, you know, so it meant a lot to me. I've watched it a few times, and I actually own it on my Xbox Series X through the Microsoft, like, Videos app. And I'll watch it again and talk about it. The sequel, though, was actually, you know, kind of an underrated and flew completely under the radar because it was direct to DVD. But at the time, it was probably the best representation of like the D&D rules and D&D world that we were going to see. It had the things that would have made the first movie so much better. Like if the second movie could have had the budget and the promotion of the first movie, then I think we'd be looking at it a lot more fondly. But unfortunately, it just didn't happen that way. But yeah, for you know, a sci-fi channel sort of thing, a direct to DVD affair, I thought the second movie was actually pretty good overall. So, and then we've got the new movie, which I saw with my daughter and a friend of mine here in the Valley, and I genuinely liked the movie. It's not perfect, you know, and there are certain things where maybe what I was looking for or what I appreciate about the movie are things that others weren't going to like. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the post-Marvel, you know, world where everybody has to be like witty and sarcastic and all that stuff, and it takes me out of a lot of movies. But as a dungeon master who has run games for several groups, when I saw the players kind of bantering back and forth and kind of like the moments where they would kind of bicker with one another or, you know, things like that, it just absolutely reminded me of every group I have ever run for. So I think they did a great job of capturing the D&D experience, if they didn't necessarily 100% completely accurately recreate the rule set, because they didn't. Like, there were some things that just weren't part of the game, but it's a movie. You got to do things to make the movie more visually interesting. You have to do things to sort of take advantage of the license that you have, like the druid shape-shifting into an owlbear or wild shaping into an owlbear. No, you can't normally do that in the game, and all the things that the owlbear did were things that she could have done if she turned into a grizzly bear. But you see somebody turn into a grizzly bear, and it's like, oh, well, you know, the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit movies had a character that did that. Or, you know, you've seen werewolf movies, so, well, maybe it's just something like that, you know, a werebear, which, you know, they have in D&D. But when you see someone turn into an owlbear, like, that's something that's going to catch the attention of the casual fan or of the non-fan, you know, that sees something that just looks completely unusual to them, and it captures their attention. When I was at the theater, actually, the usher was, I think it was my friend's brother's son or son-in-law or something along those lines, but he was connected to my friend, and he had never played D&D before. and or I don't think he had played D&D before. He mentioned that he got into D&D after watching the movie, the new movie, and that's awesome. Like that's what you want. So you sacrifice some rules accuracy for things that are going to get non D&D fans interested to the point where they explore and they join this hobby, which is something that you should always want, is for your hobby to get new people and to get fresh blood into it, to get new perspectives and to grow. And I think that the movie did a pretty good job of that. I love seeing things like, again, not rules accurate, but seeing representations of a spellcaster losing concentration was really cool, with the illusion that the wizard was trying to maintain of the bard, as well as at the end of the movie in the big climactic fight, you do see a situation where a wizard loses concentration on their spell and it causes the spell effect to end. And I thought that was really, really cool. So I enjoyed the movie. I would honestly go see it again. And when it comes out on Blu-ray, I am 100% going to be picking it up. So those are my thoughts on the D&D movie. I could talk about it a little bit more extensively in another video if you guys are interested. Let me know that. And again, it's cool if we disagree. I have a friend who saw the movie and he absolutely, he did not like it at all. And that's cool because we all have our own, opinions and perspectives. And so just, keep it civil in the comments, please. So part 2 is the game. So here, we're going to take a look at the list. I didn't really cover a lot of the first section there. Again, if you want me to go into more detail, I certainly can, but this is something that I kind of want to check out. So it's the favorite campaign settings from throughout D&D's history. I hope they have a little bit more information on them, on each of them. So let's see what we got here. Okay, so yeah, we'll read through each of these and see what we got here. How many do we have? Okay, so there's 12. So we'll go through and we'll read each of them that they have. I'm not sure if they're presenting this in like numerical order or if they're just sort of presenting them here. But we do have Exandria. So the smash hit D&D live play series Critical Role unravels across Exandria, one of the newest and most robust campaign settings available. Okay. A cataclysmic war between gods and mortals, known as the Calamity, rocked Exandria centuries ago, and as a result, the gods are banished from the mortal world. For fans of the show, this is the ultimate campaign setting, as it delivers the fantasy of fighting alongside or against beloved Critical Role characters, but you don't have to be a fan to enjoy it, either. You don't have to be a fan of it to enjoy it either. Exandria is a unique world brimming with unique schools of magic and interesting political dynamics to explore. 5e source books, Explorer's Guide to Wildemount, and Critical Role Call of the Netherdeep. So they give you a couple of examples here. Now, the Explorer's Guide to Wildemount, I wasn't overly impressed with, but I loved the Call of the Netherdeep adventure. I thought that was pretty awesome. And I liked the way that they handled certain things, like the players not being the chosen ones. Being a possibility, I thought was like, it's something that you probably don't want to push on your group, but if your group, screws around too much, then yeah, they might kind of miss out. But I just thought overall, I thought that was a really cool adventure. It was one of my more preferred ones that 5th edition has put out. I don't know if I would call it the best adventure or the best campaign setting, but I don't know a ton about it beyond the Wildemount book. I know there was like the Taldori setting, which was done by, I think, Green Ronin, which I don't have. But again, a lot of people were drawn to D&D because of Critical Role, so anything official like that gets people into the hobby, I am 100% for, because there's no like bar exam to enter the gaming community, nor should there be. So number 2 is Ravnica, which is a setting, again, that I actually really liked, even though I was dead set against it when it first came out. So in this setting, adapted from the trading card game Magic the Gathering, a single sprawling metropolis brimming with magic is governed by 10 powerful guilds. Ravnica's most robust industrial ecosystem is ripe for conflicts and adventures of all kind. There are politics, alliances, and strategic betrayals, making it a setting that appeals in particular to those fans of the psychological aspects of the adventure. Okay. If you love the campaign or the camping and traveling aspects of D&D, there are probably better options, but it's worth a try regardless. So the source book is the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. Now, they are saying 5e source books, so I'm wondering if any of these might dip into other editions. I did see like Dark Sun, which currently doesn't have a 5th edition counterpart, so we'll kind of see how that goes. But I do like the Ravnica setting. It is a niche thing. It's not going to appeal to everyone. But yeah, I actually thought once I gave it a shot, once I actually like genuinely just had an open mind and sat down and started reading it, I actually really started to like the setting. So then we have Strixhaven, so you may never get to Hogwarts or any of the many magical schools that have populated literature, film, and TV since Harry Potter took the world by storm, but thanks to this campaign setting, you can roleplay as a spellcasting student. The Strixhaven campaign also adapted from Magic the Gathering, asks players to join one of the 5 distinct colleges, Lorehold, Prismari, Quandrix, Winterbloom, and Silverquill. Once you're enrolled, it's time to navigate the rules and social structures while seeking adventure and a little trouble, a bit like any school, really. And then the Strixhaven curriculum of chaos. So that was more of an adventure. Like, I don't know if I'd necessarily call it a campaign setting. It was a campaign source book in that, like, the Strixhaven Academy could be dropped into any existing world. It's not a campaign setting in of itself, the way that like Ravnica or like the Explorer's Guide to Wildemount was. But there were things about it that I actually did like. Again, they had a really good rival sort of system incorporated into that adventure. And I actually really liked the studying mechanic where you would study certain subjects. And later on, if you needed to roll a skill check related to knowledge of that subject, you would get, I think it was like a D4 or a D6 or something like that you could add to the roll, which I thought was really cool. Like, it's a little bit different than just giving you advantage on a future roll. So yeah, I liked it. It's not going to appeal to everybody, and I don't know if I would run the adventure itself as is, but there are certainly aspects of it that I would absolutely take for my home game. All right, so number 4 is Dragonlance. So, Dragonlance refers to the powerful magic weapons used to destroy evil dragons within this classic D&D setting. While it's not necessarily the most original title for a weapon or a campaign, Dragonlance has delivered for gamers for years. Originally created by Laura and Tracy Hickman in the 80s for their own stories, Dragonlance has since evolved into one of the most popular settings thanks to an ongoing series of novels set in the world of Krynn, a world teeming with 10,000 years of history and sprawling conflicts, which makes it entrancing for those looking for long-term games with details galore. An upcoming module is set to introduce Dragonlance formally to 5th edition. Oh, this came out a while ago. Bringing with it mechanics to wage continent-spanning war. And the source book for 5e is Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen, which is currently one of my favorite 5e adventures. I really like the way that they handled that. And I'm hoping to get to run it at some point, even though it may not be specifically for 5e, because I'm going to run like various editions of D&D for my group. But I do plan on running that at some point, even if it's for a different edition. And then we got Theros. So Theros is a love letter to Greek history and mythology. Theros is another Magic the Gathering source or setting that made its way into D&D via 5th edition sourcebook. Unlike in most other settings, the gods of this universe are active participants in the affairs of mortals, passionate, powerful, and tremendously flawed. They're also not above getting mortals involved in petty squabbles or righteous adventures. The divine intervention adds an interesting wrinkle to the experience, though on the downside, race options in the official materials are limited to things like centaurs, tritons, and minotaurs, if you care about following the rules. Which is another thing that I wanted to circle back on the D&D movie, when a lot of people complain that it doesn't accurately represent the rules. Like, how many of us have run games where we did things that didn't follow the rules specifically? We house ruled things, or we changed things, or we let players do things that they wouldn't normally be able to do because we thought it would be fun for everybody. Let's not be too much of a stickler, but yeah, I mean, if I were to run Theros, I would open it up to any of the playable races for 5e. So here we have Dark Sun. So this is the first one that we've come across so far on this list that isn't actually currently available for 5th edition. So we'll see what they have to say here. So one of the few D&D settings not yet to receive a 5th edition adaptation. I guess I should have read that first. Dark Sun is set in a world where arcane magic has destroyed the planet, leaving the remaining tribes to fight for scarce resources. All that's left is a desert wasteland that emphasizes divine and psionic magic. Imagine a cross between Mad Max and D&D, and you've got an idea of what to expect here. But beware, the thrill of navigating the post-apocalypse comes with limits on magic you can use, along with typically higher stakes. Now, I don't disagree with anything that was said there, but with 5th edition, if they ever do a Dark Sun, which I kind of don't think they're going to, I know that there is a Planescapes stuff coming out in, I think this year or next year. But with Dark Sun, everything in 5th edition is like, so psionics that they have currently are tied to the wizard class. So I don't know how they'd be able to pull off Dark Sun without just finally introducing the frickin' Scion and the Psychic Warrior and the Soul Knife and just having them be classes. But yeah, I mean, Dark Sun is one of those settings that would be very interesting to see how 5th edition would handle it, though I don't think 5th edition is going to handle it. All right, up next we have Greyhawk. So yeah, some of these just don't have any suggestions at all. And this is where I'm a little bit, again, I wish that they would have just gone a little bit beyond just 5e. Again, I get that this is a magazine aimed at like new players or beginners or people that, maybe just like in that like honeymoon phase with the hobby. But there's a lot of people that would benefit from like, hey, if you like Dark Sun, maybe check this out. For example, both the 2nd edition and 4th edition campaign settings are currently available on DriveThruRPG, DM's Guild. And so if you're interested in what Dark Sun has here, then they could have said, for sources, please consult DriveThruRPG and check out their selection of Dark Sun titles. Maybe get the 2nd edition or the 4th edition campaign settings, right? It was a missed opportunity to kind of like promote beyond just the 5th edition stuff. But, I guess it is what it is. I don't know how aware they are, maybe, of the existence of things like DriveThruRPG. I don't know. Number 7, we have got Greyhawk. So D&D creator Gary Gygax developed Greyhawk as an authentic version of medieval times, which was a far cry from high fantasy. The campaign emphasizes field dynamics in a low magic, low technology world. It began as a single castle with a sprawling dungeon underneath, but evolved over time into a sort of alternate Earth full of intriguing plot hooks without much in the way of concrete lore. Sadly, 5th edition is yet to incorporate Greyhawk beyond a few scant mention and official materials. So while Greyhawk, they're presenting it as this low magic setting, like that's where Tensor, Mordenkainen, Melf, Audiluk, like that's where those iconic wizards come from. So I wouldn't necessarily call it low magic. It may not be like magic is incorporated into everyday life as it is in something like, say, Eberron, but some of the most like well-known named wizards in D&D lore history come from Greyhawk. So I don't know if I necessarily call it low magic. That said, I'm not as familiar with Greyhawk as I am with some of like the other settings. So I'm not going to comment too much on that, other than just to state that, for a low magic setting, it certainly had some pretty powerful, well-known wizards. So we'll leave it at that. Spelljammer, truly unique campaign setting, just recently introduced to D&D 5th edition with a new set of official materials. Spelljammer places its fantasy in a world of science fiction. Parties will travel the stars aboard their very own Spelljammer ship to explore alien worlds, fight pirates, and crawl space dungeons. I like that term. The overall tone of the setting leans towards the campy, so anyone who may want to play Guardians of the Galaxy type of D&D adventure, look no further. Actually, that's a pretty good way of putting it. If pulpy lightheartedness isn't your role, perhaps look elsewhere. You can still run a serious game. Like the notion that you and a lot of people will tell you this, but the notion that if something is presented in a lighthearted manner means that you, as a person running adventures or creating stuff for that setting, can't make it more serious, then like that's something that I just, you can do whatever you want with the setting. Like you could take something like Dark Sun and make it like a comedy type of RPG if you really wanted to. I'm not saying I would, but it is an option that you have. And conversely, if something is meant to be a little bit more like tongue-in-cheek, you can still run serious games. And honestly, when you get that like tonal shift, it can make a really strong impression with your group. So don't feel constrained to the way that something is presented. If you like the ideas, you like the sort of the basis of the setting. If you want to run a space-based exploration D&D game, but you want to take it 100% seriously, you can still do that. So yeah, don't let the way it's presented affect the way that you feel you have to run it, because you can do whatever you want. It's endless possibilities, right? Then we got the Feywild. So wicked and whimsical, the Feywild is technically part of the Forgotten Realms campaign setting. Feywild was, as the Feywild name, I believe, was introduced in 4E, with it being its own plane. There was always like, planes of existence that Fey came from. I don't know if the Feywild term was used before 4E, and I'm doing this without having had much coffee this morning. So I'm not entirely sure if 3rd edition had the Feywild, or if they had like some other name for their plane where Fey creatures came from. But the Feywild wasn't unique to Forgotten Realms, and the term that I associate the Feywild with first appearing was in 4th edition, which was just part of their new cosmology, where it kind of like cleaned up some of the things and incorporated some like smaller planes and put them together to make something a little bit larger. Like the plane of shadow became the Shadowfell, which went from being sort of this like mirror plane where everything's like the same but just like sort of inverse, to it being similar but a twisted, like nightmarish version of different locations. So anyway, we'll move on, I guess. I don't want to get too like actually with this magazine. But yeah, so we do have the Feywild is known for its lush, chaotic, natural beauty, drawing from real-world folklore, including fiction like Midsummer's Night Dream. All Fey originate here, including the first elves that migrated to Faerun, where the majority of D&D stories take place. The unpredictable magic in this corner of the prime material plane gives the Feywild a dreamy and sometimes nightmarish feel, though the instability of it tends to make playing a bit complex. And then the source book they gave us The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. So, yeah, okay, all right, we'll go with that. All right, we do have the Forgotten Realms. So, ostensibly the default setting for the vast majority of D&D stories in 5th edition. The Forgotten Realms encompasses everything on the continent of Faerun, including the iconic cities like Waterdeep, Baldur's Gate, and the frigid realm of Icewind Dale. As the most commonly used setting, there is a vast assortment of resources available to supplement campaigns, so there's no shortage of adventures that DMs can design. At the same time, it may start to bore experienced DMs, which you do see a lot of people talking about. 5e source books, there are many, but consider Waterdeep Dragon Heist, Ghosts of Saltmarsh, Candlekeep Mysteries, or Icewind Dale: Rime of the Frostbane. Ghosts of Saltmarsh takes place in Greyhawk, doesn't it? I don't think it takes place in Forgotten Realms, but anyway, let's move on. Ravenloft. D&D's classic horror setting, Ravenloft, is filled with vampires, the undead, and myriad other creepy creatures of the night. Its haunting lore is most famously found in Curse of Strahd, a sharply written gothic horror tale about a vampire lord and his reincarnated lover. It's one of the most acclaimed adventures in 5th edition and a must-play. Ravenloft has also been supplemented by newer materials over the years, with adventures including everything from zombie outbreaks to Hunger Games-style battle royale. It may not be for everyone, but for the people who like it are going to love it. And then they've got Curse of Strahd and Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. All right, I'll share my thoughts on this when we get to the end of the list. And then we got Eberron. So Eberron is a pulpy setting at the fringe of steampunk, where technology has evolved evolved enough that airships, lightning rails, and robot-like warforged humanoids made of wood and metal pervade the land and skies. You may call it Magitech. Eberron also serves as the origin of the Artificer class, a tinkerer that can be anything from a mad scientist Master of Potions to a demolitions expert who makes magic gadgets. It's not the brightest fantasy setting, but a celebration of a very particular genre. And the source book they have is 5e Eberron Rising from the Last War. Okay, so not a terrible list, but it is very 5e focused. And again, that's, you're going after probably a very particular audience here, so you are going to focus on what's new. And even though there are some things that I wish they would have talked about, some of like the older, like where these settings came from, they touch on it a little bit with Greyhawk, like being Gary Gygax's, campaign setting that he created, with Castle Greyhawk, which is where they did some of the like chainmail, like skirmishes stuff in, where they first were, adapting from the tabletop strategy game to the tabletop role-playing game. But like, to not mention Ed Greenwood, and the fact that, the Forgotten Realms existed long before D&D, or no, I shouldn't say long before, but it existed before D&D, or like, just Ravenloft being, having stuff that's beyond just the 5e. I kind of wish they would have done a little bit more with that. We're only getting like a little bit of a paragraph. And again, the one thing I would say is that instead of having just this like artwork taking up a lot of space, it would have been great to see each of these get like, just more information included in them. So a little bit disappointing. The list itself is fine. Again, it's, your own personal opinion. I do wish that they would have branched out beyond just like 5e history. But it is what it is, I guess. So then we got the highly recommended, the character combinations. So Paladin and Rogue, okay, so good cop, bad cop. We've got Wizard and Barbarian. So, okay, I think these are just for like players like in a group, I guess. So not like multi-class options. Bard and Druid, oh, okay. Most powerful spells and abilities, here we go. Foresight. This one's a doozy because it bends the fourth wall between players. Okay, so I've never really gotten to the point very often where players had like 9th level spells. So it just says 9th level spellcaster. But anyway, I personally, and this is just personal experience, I personally have not seen players use a lot of like the clairvoyant type of spells in my games. So I don't know if it's one of like the best abilities. Maybe it could be, and a lot of groups will have different experiences, but I've just never seen. And same with teleport, really, honestly. I haven't really had a lot of players in any of the groups that I've run for over the past 24 years actually heavily use teleport. So, Meteor Swarm, a good spell. I usually don't get to the point where the players are high enough level to be able to use it. Psychic Scream. Unleash darkness inside you by blasting your foes with a wall of sheer intellect. On a failed intelligence saving throw, your enemies will take 14d6 psychic damage and become stunned or, likely dead. I don't know where Psychic Scream comes from. I'm going to be honest. Like, I'm not up too much on a lot of player abilities. So I'm not going to comment too much on that. Sounds like a good ability. I wish it'd tell you what level you were to do it. But yeah, Disintegrate, excellent spell. True Polymorph, I've seen used a couple of times, but not often. Dark Star, Ravenous Void. Again, I'm not familiar with those ones. So if you know if they're in the player's handbook, then I guess I just never noticed them. But yeah, I'm not too. So it says these two power spells are remarkably similar in their impact, opening a black hole in the middle of a battlefield, but they carry somewhat different prerequisites. Dark Star is an 8th level spell that requires anyone in its path to pass a Constitution saving throw, while Ravenous Void, slightly more advanced as a 9th level spell, nails anyone that fails a Strength roll. The result in chaos can be a game changer. Okay, I'll have to look up those spells because I've never heard of them. A Power Word Kill, though, that one I've heard of, and that one is pretty powerful, but I haven't seen it used too much. Wish and True Resurrection, again, I haven't seen those used a lot in my day. So I'm not denying that they're powerful abilities. But yeah, like in my experience, a lot of times when players get a wish spell, they're either hesitant to use it or they'll spend like the next hour and a half trying to carefully craft how they want to word things. So yeah, anyway, and then become a Grand Master. So it's just some advice aside on your visuals. Make your players choose certain things before you begin, which is probably fair. Always give illusion of choice, even when railroading. That is very true as well. And then for fun and profit, we're probably not going to go too much into this. It's just like, people that are doing this professionally now, either like Critical Role or, like paying like for professional dungeon masters. It's not for me. I'm going to be honest. I have nothing against people that, are professional dungeon masters or will DM for money. That's totally their thing. It's not something I'm personally comfortable doing. I just enjoy running games. I don't want people to pay me for it. But hey, look, if you can do it and you love it, then that's awesome. And all power to you. It's just not for me. And we got the founding fathers, Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. Okay, a little mention of, Larry Elmore. Okay, yeah, Elmore's art. I love Elmore artwork. John Peterson. So he hasn't written a D&D book, but he is, let's see. Peterson hasn't written any Dungeons & Dragons settings or books. Instead, he's written the book, quite literally, on Dungeons & Dragons. He is the leading scholar on the history and culture of D&D and tabletop gaming, including a 2021 bestseller, Game Wizards. Oh, I never even heard of that book. I might have to see if I can find that. And then a look ahead at the next version of D&D, which I'm assuming they're talking about the playtest, although that is clearly all 5e stuff. And yeah. Okay, so it's been a bit of a longer video than I was initially intending, and we kind of skipped over a lot of stuff. Overall, I don't know if this was worth $17 if I can be completely and totally honest. I wish there was more like kind of meat in the articles and not having half pages taken up by sort of like just fantasy artwork. The artwork is good. Like, pretty much all the artwork in the book scattered through it has been really decent. But I would have liked to have seen a little bit more. It is very 5e focused, which, again, I understand. This seems like it's aimed at people that are getting into the hobby. Right. And when people are usually getting into something, they're getting into the current version, and that's totally okay. Like we all have to start somewhere, and there's no test that you have to pass to consider yourself to love Dungeons and Dragons. So 5e's all you know, and all you've ever known, or all you ever will know. That's just as valid as somebody that's been playing and gaming since the 0 edition. Or since Chainmail, or we're big into like the Avalon Hill games that helped inspire what would become Chainmail and then Dungeons and Dragons. It's totally cool. So having a resource like this it's great for beginners. Again, it's something that will give you a little bit of information on some of D&D's past. I would have liked to have seen it go a little bit more into, like for the Ultimate Guide to Dungeons and Dragons, I would have liked to have seen more about the creation of D&D, the early days of TSR, the fall of TSR, and like Wizards of the Coast buying up TSR in, I think it was like 1997. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more like history stuff in here, and a little bit less focus on just 5e materials, but it is what it is. And if it would have still done all the things that it currently is in there, like, the way that they present, but just had longer articles with less artwork, then I think this would have been a surefire, like, you got to go out and get this. As it is now, it's kind of like, I guess, a bit of an oddity in my collection, but I would not recommend paying $17 for this particular magazine. I would have liked to have had a little bit more meat on the bones. But that said, if there's anything here that I skimmed over that you would like me to go into, like reading in full or going through more of my thoughts on it, then, like I said, we can do that. This was me flipping through the magazine for the first time. So if there were parts there that you think hey, that might make a more interesting read, like the Satanic Panic stuff, if you want me to get into that, I absolutely will. And yeah, I want to check out those couple of spells that I've never heard of before, at least in D&D, and see where they are, if they're in an official like 5th edition thing, or if they may have been like third party. I don't know. But overall, it was fun to do. It was fun to flip through. And yeah, so let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. Have any of you picked up this magazine? And like I said, if there's any issue or any articles that you want me to go over in more detail, let me know and I'd be more than happy to do that. Anyway, thank you all so very, very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Until then, take care. So I guess PS, because just after I finished recording, right before I was going to sit down and start editing the video, I really, really wanted to see if I could find those spells that were mentioned. So I did. Now, again, I don't play spellcasters. I don't usually get into high-level spells, so that's why a lot of these, the spells that I mentioned there, like Psychic Scream and the Dark Star and or Ravenous Void, the reason they weren't very familiar is because, number one, they weren't in the player's handbook, and number two, they were really high-level spells. But Psychic Scream is actually found in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. So let's just take a quick look at it here. The spells start on page 147. And we actually see that Psychic Scream, if I get it to focus there, it is a bard spell. So let's take a quick look at it here. See what the level was there. I don't know why I didn't think to actually pay attention to that, but we're almost there anyway. So let's just take a look at what we got. Psychic Scream, 9th level bard spell. So, see, it's one action. The range is 90 feet. You unleash the power of your mind to blast the intellect... What? To blast the intellect of up to 10 creatures of your choice that you can see within range. Creatures that have an intelligence score of 2 or lower are unaffected. Each target must make an intelligence saving throw. On a failed save, the target takes 14 d6 psychic damage and is stunned. On a successful save, it takes half as much and isn't stunned. If a target is killed by this damage, its head explodes, assuming it has one. A stunned target can make an intelligence saving throw at the end of each of its turns. On a successful save, the stunning effect ends. So that's pretty good. Again, if somebody would have used this spell in the game that I was playing, I would have remembered, especially if somebody's head exploded. So that's where that comes from. And then the other two spells was a Dark Star and Ravenous Void. Let's just go to the back here. So Dark Star is on page 186, so that should be a good place to start for most of our spells. Okay, well there's Ravenous Void. We'll start with that one. So it is a 9th level evocation spell. You create a 20-foot radius sphere of destructive gravitational force centered on a point you can see within the range. The range is 1,000 feet. Whew, okay. I don't know if I'd really want people using this spell in my game, if I can be completely and totally honest. 1,000 feet is quite the range. Let's see. So for the spell's duration, the sphere and any space within 100 feet of it are difficult terrain, and non-magical objects fully inside the sphere are destroyed if they aren't being worn or carried. When the sphere appears and at the start of each of your turns, until the spell ends, unsecured objects within 100 feet of the sphere are pulled toward the sphere's center, ending in an unoccupied space as close to the center as possible. A creature that starts its turn within 100 feet of the sphere must succeed on a strength saving throw or be pulled straight towards the sphere's center, ending in an unoccupied space as close to the center as possible. A creature that enters the sphere for the first time on a turn or starts its turn there takes 5d10 force damage and is restrained until it is no longer in the sphere. If the sphere is in the air, the restrained creature hovers inside the sphere. A creature can use its action to make a strength check against the spell save DC, ending this restrained condition on itself or another creature in the sphere that it can reach. A creature reduced to 0 hit points by the spell is annihilated along with any non-magical item. So, yeah, personally, I don't know if I'd want that spell in my game, to be completely and totally honest. That seems a little bit a little bit much. 5d10's not bad. I mean, to be fair, the damage is not that bad. It's just like the range and the fact that it's a 100-foot area that is affected by it kind of bugs me a little bit. But I guess maybe after finally fully reading it, it's not that bad. But I could see that spell being absolutely abused. So just based on like groups that I had, and then we got Dark Star, which is not just the name of a certain student film turned like high quality student film that became a low quality theatrical film that had the beginnings of what would be the Alien franchise in there. But we got Dark Star, so this is an 8th level spell. The range is 150 feet, which is a little bit more reasonable. And concentration up to a minute. The spell creates a sphere centered on a point you choose within range. The sphere can have a radius of up to 40 feet. The area within the sphere is filled with magical darkness and crushing gravitational force. For the duration, the spell's area is difficult terrain. A creature with dark vision can't see through the magical darkness, and non-magical light can't illuminate it. No sound can be created within or pass through the area. Any creature object entirely inside the sphere is immune to thunder damage. Okay. And creatures are deafened while entirely inside of it. Casting a spell that includes a verbal component is impossible here. Any creature that enters the spell's area for the first time on a turn starts its turn there must make a Constitution saving throw or take 8d10 force damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful save. A creature reduced to 0 hit points is disintegrated, and a disintegrated creature and everything wearing and carrying except magical items are reduced to a pile of gray dust. So truthfully, this one sounds more powerful. I guess maybe not, because it doesn't pull you in. It's just if you start in the area. So, I mean, for an 8th level spell, 8d10 sounds like a lot. And it probably is, but by 5th edition standards, that doesn't seem that high. And it doesn't draw you in. So, I guess unless you cast it on somebody, you're really not going to get that much. You're really not going to get that much damage on them. Anyway, those are the spells. Those are the books that they're found in: Explorer's Guide to Walmont and Xanathar's Guide to Everything. I just wanted to include that as a little addendum here at the end of the video, just because I was a bit perplexed. They are official D&D 5th edition spells. They are in official D&D 5th edition releases. They're just not ones that I use that often myself personally, which is probably why I couldn't remember them. But there you go. Anyway, now we're done for this video for real this time. So once again, thank you all so very, very much, and I'll see you next time. Take care.